The amount of money that you said you've lost gambling, you wrote you've lost $55 million gambling over the years. How's that even possible?
Golfers who lost everything. It sounds impossible in a sport built on control, class, and calm. But behind the country clubs and million-dollar swings lie stories of addiction, ruin, and redemption that no one saw coming. These weren't just athletes. They were empires collapsing in real time. But there's more to the story, and today I'll share all the details. John Daly.
I should say I regret it, but I did it. I move on from it. I had a lot of fun doing it. That's over from probably 91 to 2007.
Okay, it's still 55
16
million.
years. Just a little over, what, 4 or 5 million a year, maybe.
John Daly wasn't born for golf. He was born for chaos. A man who swung like he was exorcising demons and dressed like Las Vegas threw up on him. When Daly burst onto the PGA Tour in 1991, the world met a golfer who looked like he'd accidentally wandered off a Leonard Skynerd tour bus and picked up a driver. No coaches, no discipline, just raw, reckless talent that couldn't be tamed. He was the anti-Tiger before Tiger even existed, the cigarette-smoking, beer-chugging outlaw who made the country club crowd clutch their pearls. And that's what made him magnetic. John Daly didn't just play golf, he detonated it. His rise wasn't just fast, it was explosive. In a sport defined by calm and calculation, Daly swung like he was trying to kill a ghost that insulted his mother. The ball flew further than anyone had ever seen, and suddenly this mulleted maniac from Arkansas was holding a major trophy. The crowds loved him, the sponsors lined up, and golf had its first real anti-hero. But while the world saw a Cinderella story, Daly was already at the casino, turning his fairy tale into a fever dream. Because for Daly, winning was too clean. He needed chaos to feel alive. Casinos became his real courses. The flashing lights replaced the fairways, and blackjack tables became his new greens. Daly didn't gamble for money, he gambled for meaning. He once bragged about losing $165 million in 5 hours, like he was telling a funny bar story, not confessing financial suicide. Over the years, the number ballooned to $55 million, a staggering total that turned his career into a live-action Greek tragedy. He wasn't chasing victory anymore, he was chasing oblivion. The man could hit a golf ball 300 yards but couldn't outrun his own self-destruction. And yet, people couldn't look away. Every loss, every meltdown, every messy headline made Daly more human, more mythic. He was golf's answer to a rock star burning out in real time, a neon warning sign flashing between the bunkers and beer carts. By the time the 2000s hit, his swing was slower, his sponsors were gone, and his hangovers had hangovers. But Daly didn't stop. He couldn't. Because deep down, the only thing scarier to John Daly than losing was the idea of being ordinary. Phil Mickelson.
And there's this huge breakfast spread, and so then they go down to the sports book, and Phil had actually written out a tip sheet for each guy, his take on each game, which is hilarious, and put a lot of thought into it.
Phil Mickelson was golf's golden boy, the polished grin, the perfect posture, the man who made suburban dads believe that nice guys could still win. He was the eternal rival to Tiger Woods, the charming foil to Tiger's icy dominance. But while Tiger's scandals came in tabloid headlines, Phil's were buried in betting slips. For decades, Mickelson smiled through interviews while secretly living like a Wall Street day trader in a Vegas casino. By 2023, the illusion shattered. Reports surfaced that he'd wagered over $1 billion in his lifetime. $1 billion, enough to buy a small country, or at least every Rolex he ever endorsed. Suddenly, golf's clean-cut family man looked less like a legend and more like a high-stakes addict who mistook risk for religion. It hadn't started with darkness. At first, it was innocent. A friendly bet on who'd hit it closest to the pin, a playful wager on the Sunday back nine. Golfers have always gambled, but Phil elevated it into an art form. Then came football spreads, college basketball parlays, and MLB bets so big they made Vegas blush. The line between casual thrill and obsession blurred faster than his backswing. The moment of infamy came when it was revealed that Mickelson almost placed a $400,000 bet on himself to win during the 2012 Ryder Cup, an act so brazen it bordered on tragicomedy. He didn't go through with it, but the mere thought screamed of a man who didn't crave money or glory, just the pulse of risk, that fleeting heartbeat between everything and nothing. Behind the smile, the numbers were horrifying. Over $100 million lost. Private jets replaced by private bookies. Offshore accounts, coded calls, and debt that no endorsement deal could hide. The man who'd built a pristine image of discipline and family values was sneaking through backroom casinos like a rogue king trying to buy his own downfall. When his betting partner Billy Walters came forward with the receipts, the curtain dropped. Suddenly, Lefty wasn't a hero. He was an addict dressed in Augusta green. By the time Live Golf threw him a $200 million lifeline, it wasn't a comeback. It was a bailout. He took it, vanished for months, and returned older, quieter, and visibly shaken. Now he talks about therapy, about finding peace, about self-awareness. But the irony is too rich to ignore. The man who built his legend on precision lost everything to chaos. Phil Mickelson didn't just gamble his fortune, he gambled the myth of who he was. And in true gambler fashion, he smiled as the house won. Wilcox.
So like the intense anxiety that I was dealing with led me to take more drugs to deal with it. Because I always used to think, pop a Percocet and then hit it 330 down the first hole and make a couple $100,000, on that Sunday. I mean, I can't picture a better day. Being just faded out of my skull, shooting 65 on the PGA Tour, getting a couple $100,000, and then going to have a party with my friends.
Wilcox wasn't supposed to be famous. He was supposed to be reliable. The grinder. The blue-collar workhorse who clawed his way from mini-tours and borrowed hotel rooms into the bright, sterile light of the PGA Tour. He wasn't flashy, he wasn't rich, and he certainly wasn't built for scandal. He was golf's everyman, until he wasn't. Because in a sport where precision is everything, Wilcox's life became one long shank into the rough. His story wasn't about fame, it was about implosion. And like every good tragedy, it started small, with a bump, a pill, a whisper of escape that turned into a scream. At first, the cracks were invisible. A missed cut here, a late-night celebration there. Nobody paid attention, because who pays attention to Wilcox? But while golf fans slept, Wilcox was awake in hotel rooms, chasing highs that made birdies feel boring. Cocaine, painkillers, anything that dulled the grind and sharpened the blur. He played tournaments high, laughed his way through withdrawals, and spent $500,000 faster than a round at TPC Sawgrass. His prize money evaporated into powder and promises. What started as stress relief turned into survival. On Sunday afternoons, he'd shake hands like a professional. By Sunday night, he was gone, swallowed by his own addiction. By 2017, the mask cracked beyond repair. The PGA Tour, desperate to keep its image clean, quietly ushered him out of sight. Rumors of overdoses swirled, whispers of suspensions circulated like ghost stories. And then Wilcox broke the silence himself. "I was a drug addict with a PGA Tour card," he admitted in a confession that stunned fans and peers alike. It wasn't PR spin, it was a cry from a man drowning in plain sight. The honesty was raw, the fall irreversible. The same fans who once called him an inspiration now refreshed Twitter threads waiting for updates on his next rehab stint. Golf, that quiet gentleman's game, suddenly had its own rock-bottom redemption story. Now, in 2025, Wilcox is still standing, not as a champion, but as a survivor. He tours the country speaking about addiction, about the invisible collapse behind the country club smile. No sponsors, no swing coach, no illusions. Just a man finally telling the truth about what the PGA doesn't put on camera. He admits he lost everything: money, friends, time, but not the will to live. Wilcox's story isn't about a fall from grace. It's about what happens when grace shows up late and still decides to stay. Anthony Kim. Anthony Kim wasn't just supposed to play golf. He was supposed to change it. The swagger, the sparkle, the walk that said, "I'm the future, and I know it." At 23, he was golf's rock star, a highlight reel wrapped in diamond chains and Hollywood confidence. The commentators called him the next Tiger, and for a brief, shimmering moment, It wasn't exaggeration. 3 PGA Tour wins, a Ryder Cup hero, a global fan base that saw in him what golf desperately needed, rebellion. But rebellion burns fast, and by 26, Anthony Kim had vanished. No farewell tour, no emotional goodbye, just poof, gone, like smoke after a fire no one saw coming. The official story said injuries, torn tendons, surgeries, rehab. But whispers told a darker tale, one laced with late-night benders, bar tabs longer than scorecards, and a life speeding too fast to break. Kim wasn't just injured, he was unraveling. He'd gone from fist-pumping birdies to drowning his own legend in excess. Behind the scenes, he partied with A-listers, gambled with Michael Jordan, and lived every day like tomorrow would forgive him. When his body gave out, it wasn't a tragedy, it was an escape route, an injury that doubled as a curtain call. And then came the insurance policy, the mysterious $10 to $20 million payout that became both his salvation and his prison. The deal was simple: take the money and never play again. For a while, it sounded like freedom. But the irony was brutal. The thing meant to save him ended up finishing him. The cash fueled his isolation. It fed the habits that had already taken root. With no reason to return, no tour to answer to, and no cameras watching, Kim vanished into the fog. For years, fans swapped theories like trading cards, rehab, bankruptcy, witness protection. But the truth was quieter, sadder. He wasn't gone to protect his wealth. He was gone to survive it. By 2024, Anthony Kim finally re-emerged, older, sober, and haunted. The swagger was gone, replaced by humility that sounded like an apology. The money's mostly spent, the fame meaningless, and the swing that once hypnotized a generation now just muscle memory. He doesn't call it a comeback, he calls it recovery, because Anthony Kim didn't just disappear from golf, he disappeared from himself, and finding your way back from that takes more than a perfect swing. David Duval. David Duval was golf's version of Wall Street, measured, meticulous, and maddeningly efficient. The man didn't just play golf, he analyzed it like a trader staring down $1 billion market swing. Every angle, every risk, every shot was data. He wasn't chasing adrenaline, he was chasing certainty, and for a moment, he had it. In the late 90s, Duval dethroned Tiger Woods, claimed the world's #1 ranking, and looked like the game's unshakable constant. He wasn't loud or flashy or reckless, he was the machine in sunglasses. But when you live on control, collapse is personal. Because when David Duval fell, he didn't just lose tournaments, he lost everything he thought made him safe. Duval wasn't content with fairways and trophies, he wanted an empire. He funneled his millions into real estate, sprawling mansions in Colorado, beachfront investments in Florida, and high-end development projects that looked like permanent proof of dominance. It was the late 1990s, money felt endless, and Duval seemed untouchable. He played the markets like he played Augusta, calm, confident, calculated. But the thing about control is that it makes you blind to chaos. And in 2008, chaos came calling. The financial crash didn't just drain his accounts, it ripped through his psyche. Overnight, the man who could read a putt like scripture couldn't read his own balance sheet. The fall was brutal. His swing abandoned him, his confidence disintegrated, and his body started breaking down under the weight of panic. Golf became secondary. Survival came first. Sponsorships evaporated. The same commentators who once called him a genius now called him a ghost. He tried comebacks, multiple, each one more desperate than the last. He chased his old rhythm through smaller tours, sponsors' exemptions, and fading crowds. But it wasn't there. The quiet genius of the late 90s was replaced by a man playing for relevance and rent. He even turned to television, joining golf broadcasts not as a legend, but as a survivor. By the time the dust settled, the empire was gone. The man once worth over $30 million was now living on modest terms, grounded by lessons that hurt too much to romanticize. It's a lesson in humility, he'd say. Not bitter, just broken in all the right ways. Because David Duval didn't lose to scandal or sin. He lost to the invisible monster called the economy, a storm you can't outthink, outplay, or output. The cruelest irony? The man who mastered control was undone by believing it was ever real. Sandy Lyle. Sandy Lyle's story isn't about flames, it's about slow burn. The polite Scotsman who defined golfing grace in the 1980s lived a life so respectable, no one noticed it falling apart. While others made headlines for wild nights, Lyle's vice stayed hidden, a quiet gambling habit that ate through his millions like moths in silk. At the height of his fame, Lyle was elegance personified. The Masters champion, the Open winner, the kind of man sponsors loved and tabloids ignored. But golf's quiet nature hid his secret perfectly. A few hands of poker after tournaments, a roulette spin in Monte Carlo, then another, then another. Soon, a bit of fun became a compulsion. He wasn't the type to brag about losses, but insiders knew. The numbers were whispered, millions gone over years of private play. There were no arrests, no scandals, just dwindling accounts and quiet asset sales. He never hit rock bottom publicly, but privately, friends described a man haunted by what he couldn't stop. By the 2000s, his lifestyle had changed dramatically. Gone were the lavish trips, the show homes, the indulgence. Lyle retreated to a simpler life, not out of choice, but necessity. Even in interviews, he's deflected the drama, calling his losses a phase. But those who know him say otherwise, that he carries regret like a weight under his gentlemanly smile. In 2025, Lyle lives modestly, mentoring young players and avoiding casinos entirely. His story doesn't scream scandal, it whispers it. Because not every downfall comes with flashing lights or paparazzi. Sometimes ruin happens behind closed doors, in quiet rooms filled with cards and silence. And Sandy Lyle's legacy reminds us, even the calmest waters can hide the deepest debts. Lee Trevino.
And when we got gambling games, I knew that the guy wasn't going to tell me what his handicap was, not his true handicap. I mean, if he was a 7, he would. If he was a 4 or a 3, he would say he was a 7, and he thought he was taking advantage of me.
Lee Trevino's life was one long punchline, until the joke turned on him. The self-made king of charisma, the man who turned golf into a comedy routine, had one weakness he couldn't laugh away: betting. If Daly was the rock star and Mickelson the high roller, Trevino was the cowboy gambler, betting on everything that moved, including himself. Born in poverty, Trevino rose to fame with charm and grit, never losing his common man touch. He'd place friendly wagers mid-round, then double down on impossible shots, not for the money, but for the thrill. But as his fame grew, so did the stakes. He bet on matches, drives, holes, anything. One report even claimed he once staked $500,000 on his own performance. It wasn't about greed, it was about proving he belonged. The outsider who hustled his way to the top never stopped hustling, even when he didn't have to. Over time, his fun became a compulsion. "I made more people rich than I ever made myself," he later joked, the kind of line that hides a wound. While Trevino never declared bankruptcy, he spent years walking the razor's edge of financial ruin. Lavish generosity, endless side bets, and a refusal to take money too seriously left him vulnerable. His charm saved him from scandal, but his wallet never quite recovered. Now, in his twilight years, Trevino laughs about it. He says he'd do it all again: the bets, the bluster, the chaos. Because in his mind, it wasn't about losing money, it was about living large. Yet the irony remains. The man who could calculate every curve on a green couldn't calculate the odds against his own luck. Trevino's fall wasn't dramatic, it was poetic. The legend who laughed through life eventually laughed through loss. Tiger Woods. Tiger Woods, the name once synonymous with perfection, now reads like a cautionary epic. He was golf's god king, the man who turned discipline into theater and dominance into destiny. Every swing looked engineered by divine mathematics. Every victory felt inevitable. Tiger didn't just win, he redefined what winning looked like. But what no one saw behind that robotic calm was the tightening pressure of a man living inside his own myth. The brand became a prison, the image a performance, and when the cracks started to show, they split straight through the foundation. The 2010 scandal wasn't just a tabloid feeding frenzy, it was an unmasking. To the public, it was a simple story of infidelity. But to those watching closely, it was the unraveling of golf's most tightly wound machine. The mistresses, the car crash, the public apology, all just surface tremors. Beneath it all were years of buried addictions, gambling binges in private Vegas suites, all-night blackjack sessions with $25,000 hands, and the slow bleed of a man trying to control chaos by creating more of it. He didn't need the money. He needed the risk, the pulse of imperfection. For a man obsessed with mastery, losing became the only thrill left. The fallout was financial, emotional, existential. Millions disappeared into divorce settlements, hush money, and therapy bills. Sponsors dropped him like a contagion. And for the first time, Tiger looked human. Not the laser-focused prodigy, but a man drowning in the very myth he'd built. His fortress of control collapsed, leaving behind someone raw, scarred, and paradoxically freer. The robot had short-circuited, and in that failure, the world finally saw the man beneath the brand. Then came 2019, the comeback that felt like a resurrection. The Masters win wasn't just sport, it was scripture. The crowd roared like they were witnessing forgiveness itself. But even that miracle couldn't erase the toll. His body kept breaking, his privacy remained fractured, and the empire he'd built plateaued, stable but fragile. He was still the GOAT, but now with the weary eyes of someone who knows greatness and peace rarely coexist. By 2025, Tiger lives quieter, mentoring his son, avoiding tabloids, and training without the need to prove anything. The billions remain, but the mythology is gone. He lost what no money could buy, the illusion of control. Tiger Woods' story doesn't end with collapse or redemption. It ends with understanding. Even perfection, it turns out, is only human. In golf, it's never the hazards on the course that ruin you. It's the ones you carry inside. These men had talent, money, and immortality waiting at the 18th hole, but they traded it for vices that don't come with scorecards. Gambling, drugs, ego, excess, different strokes, same downfall. The lesson? You can't buy balance, not even with $1 billion swing. So next time you watch a player sink a perfect putt, remember, in this game, everyone's one bad decision away from losing it all.